The moment the plate hit the floor, I swear the whole world stopped. Shards of fine china scattered across the polished wood of Bellini's, that fancy Italian restaurant in Chicago where I'd hoped to celebrate my 62nd birthday. My daughter-in-law, Vivian, stood over me, her face twisted with rage. "Which," she spat, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You never should have come." Every head in the restaurant turned, their eyes boring into me like I was some kind of spectacle. And my son, Daniel, the boy I raised through every heartache and triumph, he just sat there, staring at his wine glass, not saying a word. "I'm Eleanor, and I'm so glad you're here to hear my story. Stick with me until the end. And please, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this reaches." That night at Bellini's was supposed to be special. Daniel had called me out of the blue, his voice warm for the first time in months. "Mom, come to dinner for your birthday," he said. "It'll be good to see you." I clung to those words like a lifeline. For years, our relationship had been a patchwork of unanswered texts and hurried calls. His wife, Vivian, had made it clear I wasn't welcome in their lives. But that invitation, it felt like a chance to start over. I spent hours getting ready, slipping into my favorite emerald silk dress, the one Thomas, my late husband, always said brought out my eyes. I fastened the pearl necklace he gave me on our 20th anniversary, before the heart disease took him 6 years ago. In my purse, I tucked a small gift for my granddaughter, Lily, and a picture book for my grandson, Noah. I even brought a photo album, filled with snapshots of Daniel growing up, his first bike ride, his high school graduation, the day he told me he was going to marry Vivian. I thought we might flip through it over dessert, laughing about old times. How naive I was. The moment I sat down at the table, the air felt heavy. Vivian barely looked up from her phone, her fingers flying across the screen like I wasn't even there. Daniel kept checking his watch, his shoulders tense. I tried to break the ice. "How are Lily and Noah?" I asked, my voice bright despite the knot in my stomach. I hadn't seen my grandkids in nearly a year, and the ache of missing them was a constant weight. "They're fine," Vivian snapped, not bothering to glance at me. I pushed on, desperate to keep the conversation alive. "I brought a little something for Lily's birthday next week. And a book for Noah, he loves stories. Doesn't he?" That's when Vivian's head snapped up, her eyes cold as winter. "We told you, Eleanor, the kids don't need your cheap trinkets. They have enough." I felt the sting of her words, but I smiled through it. "I just thought," I started. But Vivian cut me off. "You thought wrong." As usual, her voice grew louder, drawing glances from nearby tables. "You always do this, trying to worm your way into our lives with your pathetic little gifts. You were a terrible mother to Daniel, and you think you can buy your way into being a grandmother?" I froze, my fork hovering over my untouched pasta. "Terrible mother?" The words hit like a slap. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something, anything, but he just sat there, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling, "is that what you think?" "Mom, maybe you should go," he mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. My heart shattered, just like that plate was about to. Before I could respond, Vivian stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, nearly toppling into the table next to us. She grabbed my plate, pasta, sauce, and all, and hurled it to the ground. The crash echoed through the restaurant, silencing every conversation. "Which," she screamed again. "You never should have come." Sauce splattered across my dress, my shoes, my pride. I felt the weight of every stare in that room, the humiliation burning my cheeks. "Daniel," I pleaded, my voice breaking, "but my son, the boy I'd raised alone after Thomas died, the boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college," he just looked away. Ashamed, not of Vivian, but of me, I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "I'm sorry for ruining your evening," I managed to say, clinging to what little dignity I had left. I walked out, head high, even as tears streamed down my face. In the parking lot, I collapsed into my car and sobbed. Through the restaurant's window, I saw them, Daniel and Vivian, ordering dessert, laughing, as if I'd never been there at all. As I drove home from Bellini's that night, the Chicago streets blurred through my tears. The pearl necklace Thomas gave me felt heavy, like it was anchoring me to a life that didn't exist anymore. Vivian's words kept echoing in my head, terrible mother. Had I been? Had I failed Daniel so badly that he could just sit there, silent, while his wife humiliated me? By the time I pulled into the driveway of the old brownstone where Thomas and I raised him, I was drowning in questions and heartbreak. I sank into Thomas's old leather armchair in the living room, the one where he used to read bedtime stories to Daniel. The house was too quiet, too full of ghosts. I pulled out the photo album I'd brought to the restaurant, the one I'd hoped we'd flip through together, laughing over old memories. There was Daniel at 5, grinning with a missing tooth, holding a Mother's Day card he'd made with too much glitter. There he was at 16, lanky and proud, standing by the used car I'd saved up to buy him. And there, at 25, beaming as he told me he was going to marry Vivian. Each picture felt like a knife, twisting deeper. After Thomas's heart disease took him when Daniel was just 14, it was just the two of us. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a real estate office, evenings waitressing at a diner, to keep the lights on and get Daniel through college. I missed some of his soccer games, sure, and I wasn't always patient when he left dishes in the sink or snuck out past curfew. But everything I did was for him, to give him a shot at a better life. I thought I'd done enough, loved him enough. Now, I wasn't so sure. When Daniel met Vivian in grad school, I was over the moon. She was polished, ambitious, the kind of woman who seemed to have it all together. I thought she'd be good for him. But from the start, she kept me at a distance. At their wedding, her smile was tight, her thank you for my modest gift colder than the winter wind. When Lily was born, I knitted her a tiny blanket, pouring my heart into every stitch. But Vivian called it too scratchy and shoved it in a closet. By the time Noah came along, I was lucky to get a Christmas card with their names printed. Not even signed. The past year had been the hardest. Vivian stopped letting me see the kids, saying I was too involved, that they didn't need a grandmother meddling in their lives. Daniel went along with it, his calls growing shorter, his excuses thinner. We're just busy, Mom, he'd say. But I felt the wall she'd built between us. Still, when he called to invite me to that birthday dinner, I let myself hope. I spent the afternoon curling my hair, slipping into that emerald dress, packing a bracelet for Lily and a train book for Noah. I even practiced what I'd say, how I'd ask about their lives without sounding desperate. At the restaurant, I tried so hard to bridge that gap. How's Lily doing with her dance classes? I asked, my voice soft, clinging to a shred of connection. Vivian's reply cut like a blade. She's fine. We don't need your input on her hobbies. I swallowed the hurt and tried again. I brought a little bracelet for her birthday next week. And a book for Noah. He loves trains. Doesn't he? That's when Vivian's eyes turned to ice. They don't need your junk, Eleanor, she said, loud enough for the waiter to pause mid-step. You can't buy their love, no matter how hard you try. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, but he just twisted the stem of his wine glass, his jaw tight. Daniel, I whispered, my heart pounding, is this how you feel? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom, maybe it's best if you go, he mumbled, so quietly I almost missed it. That's when Vivian stood, her chair screeching, nearly knocking over the table next to us, and smashed my plate to the floor. The crash wasn't just china breaking, it was every hope I'd carried into that restaurant. Every dream of being part of their lives again. That night, in Thomas's chair, the photo album open on my lap, I kept asking myself, where did I go wrong? Was I too strict when Daniel was young? Did I hover too much after Thomas died? Vivian's words, terrible mother, clawed at me. And for the first time, I wondered if she was right. The house felt too big, too empty, filled with memories of a family that no longer existed. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at those photos, trying to understand how it had come to this. The sun was barely up when I finally set the photo album aside. My eyes burning from a sleepless night, I sat in Thomas's old armchair, the leather creased from years of use, and something inside me shifted. Vivian's words, which, terrible mother, still stung. But they weren't the whole story. I wasn't just a grieving widow or a rejected mother. I was Eleanor, the woman who'd kept our family afloat after Thomas died. Who'd built a life for Daniel out of sheer will. And I was done letting Vivian push me out of my own family. That morning, as the first light crept through the curtains of our Chicago brownstone, I found an old letter from Thomas tucked in a drawer. It was written a month before he passed. His handwriting shaky but clear. "Ellie," it said, "you're stronger than you know. Protect our boy, but don't lose yourself doing it." I traced those words with my finger. Tears falling, but not from sadness this time, from resolve. Thomas was right. I'd spent too long staying quiet, trying not to rock the boat. No more. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Margaret," I said when my old friend and lawyer answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's Eleanor. I need your help." Margaret had known me since we were young. Back when Thomas and I were building sterling properties from a tiny office with one desk and a dream. She'd seen me take over the company after he died, turning it into one of Chicago's top real estate firms while I stayed in the shadows, letting others take the spotlight. I'd lived simply, not because I had to, but because I wanted Daniel to feel like he'd made it on his own. "Ellie, what's going on?" Margaret asked, her voice warm but concerned. I told her everything, the disaster at Bellini's, Vivian's cruelty, Daniel's silence, and then I told her the secret I'd kept for years. The one I'd hidden to protect Daniel's pride. "The house they live in," I said, my voice catching. "It's mine. I bought it through the company 7 years ago when Daniel said they couldn't afford that neighborhood. I set up a private sale. Let them think they got a steal. Their mortgage payments go into a trust for Lily and Noah's education." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "You've been carrying this alone for a long time," she said finally. "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling over me. "I want the truth to come out. No more secrets. Start with Vivian's credit card." For years, I'd been quietly covering the difference when Vivian maxed out her card on designer clothes, spa retreats, and trips she never told Daniel about. He thought his investment banking salary funded their lavish life. It didn't. I did. Margaret didn't hesitate. "I'll draft a letter," she said. "We'll freeze her account and request a meeting to discuss their finances." "You sure about this, Ellie? It's going to stir things up." I looked at Thomas's letter again, his words anchoring me. "I'm counting on it," I said. "It's time they know who's been holding this family together." By noon, Margaret had sent the letter to Vivian. It was polite but firm, informing her that the credit card she'd been using was linked to my account, that I'd been supplementing their lifestyle, and that the account was now frozen. It also requested a meeting to clarify the financial arrangements of their home. I could almost picture Vivian's face when she read it, those cold eyes widening in shock, her carefully constructed world starting to crack. As I waited for the fallout, I walked through the house, past the kitchen where Daniel used to do his homework, the porch where he had his first kiss, the backyard where he and Thomas tossed a baseball on summer evenings. This house held every memory of the family we'd been, but it also held the truth I'd kept buried. I wasn't just Daniel's aging mother, scraping by on a modest pension. I was the backbone of Sterling Properties, the one who'd grown it into an empire while living in the same modest brownstone to keep those memories alive. I didn't know how Daniel would react when he found out. Would he be angry? Relieved? Would he see me differently? Or would Vivian's poison run too deep? All I knew was that I couldn't keep hiding. Not from him, not from myself. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of clarity. A fire I thought had gone out with Thomas. This wasn't just about setting the record straight, it was about fighting for my family. For the truth. For the woman I'd forgotten how to be. 2 days after Margaret sent the letter, my doorbell rang with a sharp, angry buzz. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. My heart was pounding, but I took a deep breath and smoothed my sweater, trying to steady myself. I'd spent years tiptoeing around Vivian's temper, but this time, I was ready. The truth was out, and there was no going back. When I opened the door, Vivian stormed in, her designer purse clutched like a shield. Daniel trailed behind, his face a mix of confusion and frustration. "What the hell is this, Eleanor?" Vivian snapped, waving the lawyer's letter in my face. "You think you can humiliate me by freezing my card? In front of everyone at Saks. No less." Her voice was shrill, her cheeks flushed with fury. I noticed Daniel's jaw tighten. But he didn't say a word, not yet. I gestured to the dining room table, where I'd laid out a folder of documents. Please, sit, I said, keeping my voice calm, though my hands were trembling. Vivian didn't move, but Daniel sank into a chair, his eyes darting to the papers. What's this about, Mom? He asked, his voice low, almost wary. I sat across from him, folding my hands to keep them steady. It's time we talked about the truth. Daniel, about your house, your finances, and how things have really been working. Vivian let out a sharp laugh, cutting me off. Oh, please, this is just your pathetic attempt to get back at me for the restaurant. You're trying to control us, just like you always have. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I opened the folder and slid it toward Daniel. These are the deeds to your house, I said, the one you and Vivian live in with Lily and Noah. You thought you bought it at a steal 7 years ago, didn't you? Daniel nodded slowly, his brow furrowing. Well, you didn't. I bought it through Sterling Properties. I own it, always have. Daniel's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, flipping through the papers. That's not possible, he said, his voice shaking. I've been making the mortgage payments every month. I nodded. You have, but those payments go into a trust I set up for Lily and Noah's education. You've never paid a cent toward the actual house because I didn't want you to feel like you needed my help. Vivian's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, slamming her hand on the table. This is absurd. You're making this up to turn Daniel against me. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Am I? Then explain this. I pulled out a stack of bank statements, sliding them across the table. These show every time I covered your credit card when you went over the limit. Designer dresses, spa weekends, that trip to Aspen you never told Daniel about. Your lifestyle? I've been funding it for years. Daniel grabbed the statements, his hands shaking as he scanned them. This can't be right, he muttered, his voice breaking. Vivian, what's this charge for $12 at a jewelry boutique? I don't remember you buying anything like that. Vivian's eyes darted to the side, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear. It's nothing, she said quickly, just a gift for a friend. A friend? Daniel's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. He turned to me, his face a storm of emotions. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why keep this a secret? I swallowed hard, the weight of his question pressing down on me. Because you made it clear you didn't want my help. Daniel, you wanted to build your own life. And I respected that, but I couldn't watch you struggle. So I helped in the only way I thought I could, quietly. Vivian's laugh was bitter, cutting through the room. Oh, spare us the martyr act. Eleanor, you've always been controlling, suffocating Daniel with your so-called love. You're just mad because he chose me over you. Her words hit like a slap. But I kept my eyes on Daniel. Is that what you believe? Daniel? I asked softly. That I suffocated you? He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the papers, his hands gripping them so tightly they crumpled. The silence was unbearable, broken only by Vivian's sudden outburst. This is ridiculous, she shouted, grabbing her purse and knocking a glass off the table. It shattered on the floor, a grim echo of the restaurant. You're trying to ruin our lives. Eleanor, Daniel, are you coming, or are you going to let this woman manipulate you again? Daniel looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like years. There was something new there, doubt, maybe even anger, but not at me. I need to see this through, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Vivian's face twisted with rage. If you stay here with her, don't bother coming home. She stormed out, the front door slamming so hard it rattled the windows. The room fell silent, the air heavy with everything left unsaid. Daniel stared at the documents, his fingers tracing the numbers that laid bare the truth. Mom, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. How did I not know any of this? I reached across the table, wanting to take his hand but stopping myself. Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. I said, I just wanted to be part of your life, even if it was from a distance. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. I don't know what to think, he said, his voice cracking. I need time. I nodded, my heart aching but steady. Take all the time you need. Daniel, I'll be here. As he stood to leave, the folder still in his hands. I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The truth was out, raw and jagged, and there was no telling what would happen next. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was fighting for my family, not with money or secrets, but with honesty, and that felt like a start. The days after Vivian stormed out were a blur of silence and waiting. I kept expecting Daniel to call, to show up, to say something, anything. But the phone stayed quiet, and the house felt emptier than ever. I busied myself with work, flipping through contracts for sterling properties, but my mind kept drifting to that moment at the dining table. Daniel's eyes searching mine for answers. Had I pushed him too far? Would he choose Vivian's version of the truth over mine? I didn't know, and the not knowing was eating me alive. Then, one rainy afternoon, I was in the kitchen making tea when my old friend Clara stopped by. Clara's been my rock since high school. The kind of friend who shows up with a bottle of wine and no judgment. She sat across from me at the counter, her eyes serious. "Ellie, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice low. I should have said it years ago, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to stir things up without proof. My stomach twisted. "What is it, Clara?" She took a deep breath. 2 years ago, I saw Vivian at the Drake Hotel downtown. She was with a man, not Daniel. They were in the lobby, laughing, his hand on her back. It didn't look like a business meeting. "Ellie," I set my teacup down. The clink loud in the quiet kitchen. "You're sure it was her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Clara nodded. I didn't say anything because I hoped there was an innocent explanation. But after what happened at the restaurant, I can't stay quiet anymore. Her words hit like a punch. I thought of all the times Vivian had kept me at arm's length. The way she'd shut me out of Daniel's life. The kids' lives. Had she been hiding more than just her disdain for me? Before I could process it, Clara leaned forward. "There's more," she said. "Last summer, at a friend's book club, Vivian had a few too many glasses of wine. She was bragging to some women about how she had it all figured out, a husband who didn't question her spending and a mother-in-law who was too clueless to realize she was bankrolling her lifestyle. She knew. "Ellie, she's known for years that you were covering her credit card." I felt the air leave my lungs. All this time, I thought I was helping Daniel, protecting his pride by quietly paying for Vivian's extravagance. Instead, she'd been laughing at me, using me, playing me for a fool. She thought it was hilarious. Clara added softly, her words, not mine. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was a deep, aching sadness, for Daniel, for Lily and Noah, for the family I'd tried so hard to hold together. That night, I was still reeling when my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and my heart leapt. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice tight, like he was holding back a storm. "Can I come over? I need to talk." 20 minutes later, he was at my door, soaked from the rain, his face pale and drawn. He didn't sit, just paced the living room, running his hands through his wet hair. "I found something," he said finally, pulling an old phone from his pocket. Vivian left it in a drawer. I wasn't even looking, but I saw her messages. He handed me the phone, his hands shaking. I scrolled through texts from someone named Richard, hundreds of them. Going back years. "Meet me at the Drake." One said, "Daniel's out of town," said another, the most recent one, from just a week ago. "Read, we'll be free soon, just a little more time." My heart sank. "Daniel," I started, but he cut me off. "There's more, Mom. I hired a private investigator. I had to know how deep this went." What he told me next made my blood run cold. The investigator found a secret bank account in Vivian's name, hidden in the Bahamas, over $400, siphoned from their joint accounts, from my supplements, from the life Daniel thought they'd built together. "She's been planning to leave," he said, his voice hollow. "Her and this guy, Richard, they were going to take the kids and disappear once she had enough money." I reached for his hand, and to my surprise, he let me take it. His fingers were cold, trembling. "The kids," I said softly. "How are they?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Confused. "Vivian told them I'm on a business trip. I haven't figured out how to tell them their mother's been lying to us all." He sank onto the couch, his shoulders slumping. "I've been such a fool. Mom, she convinced me you were the problem, controlling." Meddling. I believed her because it was easier than facing the truth. I sat beside him, my heart breaking for the pain in his voice. We were both deceived. Daniel, I said gently, she built a wall between us. And I let her because I was afraid of losing you completely. He looked at me, his eyes raw with regret. I'm sorry, Mom, for the restaurant, for shutting you out, for believing her lies. I should have seen it, the late nights, the missing money, the way she always had an excuse. I squeezed his hand, tears stinging my eyes. You're not a fool, Daniel. You loved her. We see what we want to see when it comes to the people we love. He shook his head, his voice breaking. She never loved me. I was just a means to an end. I wanted to tell him it wasn't true, to soften the blow, but I couldn't lie, not now, when the truth was finally breaking through. Instead, I asked, what will you do now? He straightened, a flicker of resolve in his eyes that reminded me so much of Thomas it hurt. I've frozen our accounts. I'm talking to a lawyer about a divorce. Maybe even pressing charges for what she's done. But, Mom? He hesitated, his voice softening. I need a favor. Can the kids and I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out? For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope, warm and fragile, in my chest. Of course you can, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This is your home, Daniel. It always has been. As he nodded, his eyes meeting mine with a gratitude I hadn't seen in so long. I knew this was the beginning of something new. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, we were facing the truth together. The first morning Daniel and the kids moved in, I woke to the sound of Lily's giggles echoing through the house. It was a sound I hadn't heard in so long. It felt like a gift. I stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, while Noah, my 5-year-old grandson, tugged at my apron. Grandma, can we put blueberries in them? He asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Lily, 8 and full of energy, was already drawing a picture of a ballerina at the table, insisting it was for me. For the first time in years, my old brownstone didn't feel like a museum of memories, it felt like a home again. Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking tired but lighter, like a weight had lifted. They've missed you, Mom, he said, watching Lily tape her drawing to the fridge. Even with Vivian keeping you away. They'd talk about Grandma Ellie's cookies and bedtime stories. My heart swelled, but it ached too, for all the time we'd lost. For the years Vivian had stolen from us. Still, having them here, filling the house with laughter and crayon scribbles, was more than I'd dared to hope for. A week later, I made a decision I'd been putting off for years. I called Margaret, my lawyer, and told her I was ready to step out of the shadows. No more hiding my role at Sterling Properties. I said, it's time people knew who's been running things. I'd spent decades letting others take credit for the company's success. Partly to protect Daniel's pride. Partly because I didn't want the spotlight. But after everything, Vivian's betrayal, Daniel's silence at the restaurant, I was done shrinking myself. Margaret didn't sound surprised. About time, Ellie, she said, the board's behind you. You're the reason Sterling's a name in Chicago. A few days later, we announced it. Eleanor Harper, widow of Thomas Harper, was the CEO who'd grown Sterling Properties into an empire. The news hit the Chicago business scene like a thunderbolt. One headline read, "The quiet powerhouse behind Sterling Properties revealed." Lily came home from school waving a newspaper clipping, her eyes shining. "Grandma, my teacher says you're an inspiration." I laughed, but inside, I felt something new, pride. Not just for Daniel or the kids, but for myself. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I hosted a dinner party. Just a small one, Clara and her husband, my old friend Michael, who'd recently lost his wife, and Daniel. The kids were at a sleepover, giving us a rare night of adult conversation. I set the table with Thomas's old china, the plates chipped but full of memories, and poured wine as laughter filled the room. Michael, with his warm smile and quiet humor, raised a glass. "To Ellie," he said, "for reminding us what strength looks like." I blushed, but I felt alive, like a part of me that had been locked away was finally free. Later, as we cleared the dishes, Michael lingered in the kitchen. "There's an opera at the Lyric next weekend," he said, a little shy. "I've got an extra ticket. Would you like to come?" My heart fluttered, something I hadn't felt in years. "I'd love that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Across the room, Daniel caught my eye and gave me a small, approving nod. For the first time, I saw him not just as my son, but as a man who was starting to see me as more than just his mother. Meanwhile, Daniel was moving forward. He'd filed for divorce, and Vivian's lawyer had reached out, desperate to negotiate. The private investigator's evidence, her secret account, the affair with Richard, was damning. Vivian missed court hearings, too busy living it up in Miami, and eventually agreed to supervised visitation with Lily and Noah. Just twice a month, Daniel told me over coffee one morning, his voice steady but sad. She's given up on them. Mom, she wants a payout and no charges for the money she took. I just want this over. For the kids' sake. I squeezed his hand. You're doing the right thing, Daniel. They need you, and they need a home built on truth. He nodded, looking out at the backyard where Lily and Noah were chasing each other through the grass. I've been blind for so long, he said quietly. I let her convince me you were the problem, when all you did was hold us together. I'm so sorry, Mom. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of relief. We're here now, I said. That's what matters. A few weeks later, Daniel came to me with an idea. This house is full of memories, he said, but maybe it's time for a fresh start. A new place, for all of us. My heart skipped. You mean, together? He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, Mom, you, me, Lily, Noah, we're a team now. We found a new house not long after, a bright, spacious place with a big yard near the kids' school and my office. It had a separate wing for me, a space to call my own, but close enough to hear Noah's laughter or Lily's chatter. Daniel insisted on paying half, using his consulting income. It's not about pride, he said when I tried to argue. It's about building this life together. As we signed the papers, I felt something I hadn't in years, hope. Not just for Daniel and the kids, but for myself, for the woman I was finally allowing myself to be. As I stand on the porch of our new house, watching Lily and Noah chase fireflies in the yard, I can't help but marvel at how far we've come. 6 months ago, I was sitting alone in that old brownstone, wondering if I'd ever be part of my son's life again. Vivian's betrayal, her cruel words at Bellini's, the plate shattering on the floor, it all felt like the end. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of something stronger. Something real. The truth, as painful as it was, set us free. Daniel and I have rebuilt our family. Not with secrets or money, but with love and honesty. The kids fill this house with laughter. And Daniel's learning to be the father they deserve. As for me, I'm not just a mother or a grandmother anymore, I'm Eleanor. A woman who's finally living for herself. 2. That opera with Michael last weekend? It was the first of many nights I've started to dream about. Nights filled with possibility. Vivian wanted the house, the money, the control, but she missed what mattered most, the bonds we build, the trust we earn, the love we share. Those are the things no one can take away. I've learned that family isn't about holding on to the past or buying your way into someone's heart. It's about showing up, telling the truth, and choosing each other, even when it's hard. So, I'm curious about you, the ones listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight for the truth in your family? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your stories. And while you're at it, tell me the city you're watching from. It means the world to know how far this journey has reached. If you're looking for more stories like this, check out the 2 I've linked at the end of this video, they'll surprise you. I promise. Thank you for being here, for walking this path with me. Here's to new beginnings, for all of us.